Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org. Edina Eye Physicians and Surgeons, a division of Twin Cities Eye Consultants, has proudly served the Twin Cities for more than 55 years now in 7 convenient locations. Using the most advanced technology combined with human touch, Edina Eye offers comprehensive services and dedicated specialists committed to excellence, with innovative procedures and expertise for the most advanced eye care.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Access to Democracy. I'm your guest host today, Steve Francisco. Thanks for joining us. We have a special guest with us today. It's his first time appearing on the program. He is Hugo Searle, the new fire chief for the city of Eagan. Hugo, welcome to our show, Access to Democracy.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thanks for coming. You know, many of you may not know Hugo. You haven't met him yet, but you're going to be seeing him around the city of Eagan. His predecessor, Mike Scott, had been interviewed on our program numerous times, and I had the pleasure of interviewing him too. And we're very proud of the fire department that we have here in the city of Eagan, the men and women who keep us safe. So thank you for that, first of all, too.
Well, I'm very proud of them too.
I would like to ask you, talk a little bit about your background. Who is Hugo Searle? You have a little bit different background than fire chiefs we've had in the city in the past. You come from afar.
Yes.
That you grew up in North Wales in the United Kingdom and spent part of your childhood, we understand, in Africa. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So really, I was born in Wales, and then when I was very young, we moved to Kenya. My parents were both teachers, and they decided they wanted an adventure, so they took their young family to Kenya. And so I lived in Kenya while I was doing my elementary schooling, and then we moved back to Wales. I finished up my schooling there, went to university in London, and then did some traveling around the world. I traveled around for a couple of years and ended up in the United States, ended up in Minnesota, and met and fell in love with a local girl and stayed here and made my life here. So
and been here ever since.
Been here ever since. So yeah, I am from afar, but I've been here in the Twin Cities for over 25 years
Good
now,
long time.
and so I feel somewhat like I belong a little bit.
Most definitely. And your prior experience as a firefighter, you come to the chief's position here in the city of Eagan with considerable experience. 19 years with the St. Louis Park Fire Department, and another 10 years with the Brooklyn Park Fire Department.
Yeah, those numbers are correct, and both departments were really important in developing me and developing my leadership, and they're really good departments.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very lucky to be a member on both of those.
Were they part-time fire departments the way Eagan used to be?
So what's interesting is that they have both undergone somewhat the same transition that Eagan has done in the last few years. So St. Louis Park was a combination department of full-time and part-time, and has now gone solely full-time. Mm-hmm. Brooklyn Park, when I joined it, was only part-time, and then it went combination by getting some full-time and some part-time, and now it's gone only full-time. And in the Eagan Fire Department, it's done the same thing. So we're all sort of following each other. And it was a great experience for me to go through those changes with those other departments, because I could learn, you know, ways that were successful and ways that were maybe not so successful.
So what were the factors that went into Eagan creating basically a full-time fire department instead of the part-time department that we had previously? And where are things as far as that transition to full-time? Is it complete?
It is complete. As of January 1st, actually, we are now a full-time department, full-time career department. The Eagan used to be a very large part-time department, and with part-time firefighters, you know, there are times in your life where it's very easy for you to make that commitment to, you know, have a regular job and a career and a family and do the fire department. And there's times in your life where maybe you've got young kids, or maybe your career is taking off, that it becomes more difficult. And we've seen in Minnesota a change in the patterns in the way people live their lives. And so the sustainability of the part-time model here in the metro area has been proven to be one that's difficult to sustain. And so a lot of the big cities in the metro area have started moving towards staffing models that have more full-time people in them, so they can more reliably put their fire trucks on the road and respond in the manner that the citizens should expect.
So Hugo, I suspect I know the answer to this question, but I just want to ask you, I'm assuming that going to a full-time department probably reduces response time on emergency calls?
Yes, it does. So we talk about staffed engines. So in the business, so if in a full-time department you have staff at the fire station ready to get on that fire engine immediately, within seconds. In a part-time model, when you have to use a pager to call people to come to the station, they can come very quickly, but it's still a matter of minutes extra, and that shows up in the response time.
And these minutes can make the difference between life and death in a critical situation.
Very much so, and even more so today than they did even 20 years ago. The construction methods we're using in our buildings and the type of materials that we're using have caused fires to expand and grow so much faster than they ever did 20 years ago. In fact, we call the difference in building construction legacy, you know, traditional legacy construction versus modern construction, because they're so very different in the way the fires spread. And so speed and getting to the fires is very, very important. It makes a huge difference.
You know, still a new year. This year of 2022 has gotten off to a horrible start. There were 2 horrific fires on the East Coast, the Bronx, New York, 19 dead, including 9 children. 32 people with life-threatening injuries due to a fire started by a malfunctioning space heater, I believe. January 5th in Philadelphia, we saw 9 children, 3 adults killed in a fire that, it's been reported, the child was playing with a lighter and ignited a Christmas tree, and all these people ended up dead and injured. It seems that in these cases too, there was dense housing, that you had a lot of people living in these apartments, maybe more than should have been, but that's sort of perhaps a circumstance of the times that we're living in, with people losing jobs and with the pandemic and all. Are we prepared here in Eagan if we were to ever have a large fire?
Well, first of all, I want to say those are some very tragic stories, and you know, we don't ever want to see that, no matter where it is in the world. Here in Eagan, you know, I would say that we are very well prepared. We have a fire department that is well trained, well equipped, has good apparatus. Our response times are good. So responding to the fire, I have utmost confidence that we would do the best job we could possibly do. But really, in situations like that, it's preventing the fire, which is the key. And the city of Eagan has done a really good job in building up its prevention side. And that means code enforcement by building inspectors. It means you know, rental codes and enforcement. It means our fire marshal doing fire code enforcement. It means us messaging smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors, and changing your batteries, and having fire extinguishers, and being safe with your cooking, and all these messages that we do in fire prevention. And the City of Eagan is very good about getting those messages out, and shares with the community in a very modern way those messages. So I think, you know, you can never say we're perfectly prepared, and it could never happen here. I think the chances of it happening are far smaller, and I'll give you an example from earlier this year. Just the first week in January, we had an apartment fire here in Eagan, a 3-story big multi-residential fire apartment building with the fire on the 3rd floor. And it's an unsprinkled building. And so buildings like this are some of our worst hazards. Because the fire is unsprinkled, and because the fire might go unnoticed for a while in an apartment building, by the time it can break into the roof, and it can run the whole building, and there can be people that are sleeping, and all these nightmare situations that can lead to a terrible story like you mentioned earlier. We were able to get to that fire and get it out and contain it to one unit that displaced only one family.
Wow.
And that was basically to do with response time. You know, I'm not a scientist, but I would guess that in another 2 to 3 minutes, it would have made it into the loft of that whole building, and we would have lost probably half a wing of that building.
I've seen videos in the past about how fast a fire in a residence or an apartment can expand if left undiscovered or unattended. It's really shocking how quickly a structure can catch on fire.
It's very shocking, and there are videos that research scientists put out to show you how fast a Christmas tree will go up in flames and make your living room untenable, and bank down smoke that is toxic, and you know, and so we use these as training videos. But you know, that apartment building that we had a couple of weeks ago, you know, one family was displaced who we're now helping, and the total loss was just one apartment. You know, in a different staffing model in the City of Eagan 10 years ago, that might have been 10 families displaced, millions of dollars of damage. So, you know, our staffing model, Eagan's done a great job in preparing.
That's good to hear. And I assume we have mutual aid relationships with some of our neighboring cities, Inver Grove Heights, Apple Valley, Burnsville, Bloomington. Could you say a word about what those relationships are?
Absolutely.
And do you train together occasionally?
Yes, we do. So we do have those mutual aid agreements, so that when Inver Grove Heights has a fire, they'll call us to come and help. And when we have a fire, we'll call them to come and help. And you may have heard the term, you know, a 2-alarm fire or a 3-alarm fire. So we set up our responses based on the alarms. So a basic fire is a 1-alarm fire. And for that, we will usually get 2 mutual aid companies. Depending which city it is, depends on where the fire is. And then the 2nd alarm fire will draw some more. 3rd alarm fire will draw some more. So if we have a really big fire scene where we go to 3 or 4 alarms, we might have people from South Metro in St. Paul, Mendota Heights, Burnsville, Inver Grove Heights, Apple Valley, Lakeville, and beyond. So yeah, we have very good relationships with all those departments in Dakota County, and we train together, and we train our rookies together. So, you know, the South Metro Fire Department and the Burnsville Fire Department and the Eagan Fire Department, we have an academy for our full-time firefighters. And previously, with our part-time firefighters, we'd also have academies with Inver Grove Heights and other cities as well. So,
also, I wanted to ask you, how many fire stations do we have in the city now? And how many full-time firefighters do we have? I meant to ask that at the outset.
Well, we have 3 fire stations in Eagan, and we have 39 on-shift officers and firefighters. So that's battalion chiefs, captains, and firefighters. There's 39 of them, spread between 3 shifts and 3 stations. So there's 13, full staffing would be 13 response firefighters on duty at a time, and spread between 3 stations.
Good. I wanted to ask you, we're living through the midst of a terrible pandemic, the worst public health crisis in at least 100 years. We've seen too many people have gotten sick, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions, and thousands of people who have sadly passed away from this illness, this disease, COVID-19, and the Omicron variant and the Delta variant. How has the pandemic affected the fire department in terms of your personnel, and what has it been? What has it been like during this crisis in terms of your staffing and also in terms of the way you do your job on emergency response?
Well, thank you for asking this question, because this has been a very difficult time for the fire service in general and all first responders, police and paramedics, and hospital staff. In the fire service, and specifically in our fire department, we have, there's been a lot of fear. When this first came out, I don't know if you remember back 2 years ago when we first started talking about this, there was a lot of fear. We didn't know what it was, how it transmitted, and who was going to live and who was going to die. And so the whole world basically was told to isolate, work from home, except for firefighters.
You can't work from home.
You still got to come to work, you still got to be together, you still got to then go home to your families. So we were worried that, you know, we would get infected at work and then take it home and kill our families. And so then we talked about maybe we should, you know, rent housing for our firefighters, so when they're off shift they live somewhere else. You know, I mean, we went through these kind of thoughts. It was a very scary time. People, you know, weren't sure what was going to happen. Now, obviously then throughout the whole pandemic, there's been lulls, and then, you know, it gets more serious, but the whole time the fire department has been on the front lines of that, going on the medical calls, meeting with the people that have COVID and have symptoms, and helping, you know, get them transported to hospital, helping them get the care they need, and being exposed. So the biggest thing for our fire department was worrying about staffing levels. What if we get so many people infected on the fire department that we can no longer put a fire truck on the street? You know, so so we call it force protection. We're trying to protect our firefighting force.
The same type of question, by the way, that I think our military and the police have had to deal with, people who, as we said, they can't phone in or work remotely. You have to show up when the bell rings.
Yes, in Eagan, Chief Roger New and I have met and talked about this on many occasions. Our force protection, how are we going to keep enough people from getting sick at the fire department? And a lot of them have got sick, have got COVID. We're fortunate to have a lot of firefighters, a large percentage of our firefighters that are vaccinated and boosted.
I was going to ask you about that.
And that helps them to have, you know, as we found, less serious illnesses and able to return to work faster. And maybe my focus on return to work is a little harsh. I should be focusing on them and saying, how are you? But, you know, that's really what we you know, as a chief, I'm worried about them, but I'm also worried about protecting, you know, our citizens and our residents here, and having them return to work.
So one of the great things I think about the Eagan Fire Department, and those of us who've lived here for many years, one of the things we love about our city and our fire department, in the summer on National Night Out, the fire department and the police department here in Eagan make the rounds. They come to my complex every year. Kids get very excited when they see that pumper truck pull in with the lights flashing and the siren and the air horn being blown, and they come running. Tell us a little bit about your outreach to the community, because I've seen on the city website one of your goals is to make the fire department more visible in the community, not just when people call 911, but in other ways too. So what are some of those community outreach activities?
Well, I love National Night Out. As a firefighter going to National Night Out, I've had my face painted, I've sung karaoke, I've played table tennis.
You really get into it.
I love it. It's a great time. It's a great time to share with the community in a positive environment. A lot of the times we're there and it's an emergency, and so being able to spend time with people in a happier time, it's great.
Yeah.
But yes, you're right. It is my intention to connect our fire department more closely with our community. we have, with our staffing model of firefighters in the station every day, it's easier for us to visit a school or be at a park or be somewhere where the community are.
Block party
block
or
parties,
such things.
yes, absolutely. Eagan puts on a lot of fantastic events throughout the year, and we want to be there. We want to be there, even if we're just there with a truck to show the kids and chat. But we can do a job there. We can be there with our medical bags, and if at the food truck festival where there might be 10,000 people, if we can be embedded in the middle of it with a rescue truck, we can be talking to the community, but we can also do a faster, better service if somebody gets sick and has an illness at that time.
Absolutely.
If somebody from the community is having a fundraiser for charity, maybe I can think of one example where they did a 5K run in the memory of a student that passed, and they asked if we could come to that, and we did. We brought a truck over, and we were there at the start of it. The high school, if you look at the high school football team, this year it was about their motto was climb the ladder. And so we took our ladder truck over there, and we got all the football players in front of the ladder truck taking a picture and stuff. So we want to be involved in those things because this is Eagan's Fire Department.
That's great.
We don't want to hide behind doors. We want to be out there helping you, passing out the information on prevention and making our city safer.
See and be seen.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me go back to something earlier I wanted to ask you. You were talking about, when we were talking about preventing fires, I don't want to let this opportunity go. How often, again, should people check their smoke detectors and replace the batteries for the battery-operated smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors?
Yeah, so I would say they need to check them every month, and they should replace the batteries every time they change their clocks.
Okay.
Now,
you mean from daylight saving time to standard? So
yes.
twice a year they should check them.
Yeah, they should check them. And somebody will say to me, but I bought this detector that doesn't have replaceable batteries and it lasts for 10 years. I'm like, well, okay, that's great, but make sure you know when that 10 years is up. Mm-hmm. It will start malfunctioning and beeping, but we don't want it to get to that point. We want it to be.
No.
And then, a lot of people have their detectors are linked together in their house and are hardwired as well, so they have, they're on electricity with battery backup. And so when you test the button on one,
right.
It tests all of them.
That's right.
Right. And I know that can scare the dog or the cat, but do that every month.
And these things, as you said earlier, they are so important. The best thing any of us can do is prevent a fire from ever happening in the first place. But if it does, to know that you're going to be able to get out and get your family and your pets out of the house.
Yeah, I mean, also have a discussion with your family about what happens in the middle of the night. Where do you go? Have an evacuation plan, have a meeting place.
Right.
In my house with my daughter when she was little, we'd always talk about, it's the tree by the bus stop where you buried your goldfish. That's your meeting tree. Go there.
And I'll look for you there. Before we let you go today, Hugo, you come from a very interesting background, not only being from the United Kingdom, from Wales, and having lived in Africa, but I see in your biography that one of your hobbies and great interests of your life is high altitude mountaineering and leading teams even up to Mount Everest in the Himalayas and climbing other peaks. Say something about that. How did you become interested in mountain climbing, and how does that relate to your career as a firefighter?
Well, I grew up in North Wales, and it's a mountainous region, so I was climbing. I loved climbing as a kid, and so I was always climbing higher and higher mountains in Europe, and organizing trips. So, say you're my friend, and we climb together, and I'm like, hey, let's go to the Alps, you and I, next week. And so we do climbing trips. So I'd organize climbing trips all over the world, and then by accident, I met a friend of mine who's just starting a guiding company, and he asked me to start guiding for him, and then I started guiding for another company out of Canada, and then I started my own guiding company. By that time, I was guiding exclusively in the Himalayas.
Right.
So
You had told me that you had made one expedition and reached the summit of Mount Everest. Tell us how high that is, and what is that moment like when you are standing literally at the top of the world?
You have to remember that I was a little boy that grew up, pretty poor in Africa, and as a climber, I used to read the stories about Mount Everest. They used to fascinate me, and I remember in 2001, I was in the Himalayas doing another mountain, and I saw Mount Everest, and it was the pinnacle of my life, because I remembered that little boy, and I was like, look, I've actually seen it with my own eyes. Who ever thought I would do that? And then you fast forward a few years, and I'm guiding on Mount Everest, and then I get to the top, and actually, you can't see the summit of Everest until you get pretty close. And there's this big, huge block of rock in front of me on the trail. And I remember I stepped to the side of this block, and I looked, and there about 50 yards away was the summit of Everest.
Wow.
And I got overcome with emotion. I'm wearing an oxygen mask and goggles, and I started tearing up, and I was like, oh, those tears are going to freeze.
Who wouldn't be overcome?
And I was like, stop crying, Hugo, you're going to freeze those tears, it's going to be bad news. And so, but I was so close, and by the time I got to the top, I was just happy, and it was exciting. And,
by the way, for those Minnesotans who we are in the middle of our Minnesota winter here, and sub-zero overnight and 20 below wind chills, how cold is it at the top of Everest?
Probably about as cold as it is out today. I mean, it's sub-zero, but it's cold, and at night even colder. So,
I want to ask you one last question, Chief. There are some young people who may be watching us who are thinking about careers in firefighting. What should they study in school? We have about less than a minute left here.
Sure. Well, first of all, they want to do well in school. A lot of school programs now have opportunities for you to do some medical training. So emergency medical technician, EMT, or emergency medical responder, or something like that. If you can get in a program like that, or you can go to your local fire department and ask if they have an Explorer program, and you can start that way.
So good ideas, ways for young people to think about firefighting as a career.
Yep.
Yeah, very interesting.
It's a great career.
I want to thank you for your first appearance on Access to Democracy today, Hugo. It's a pleasure to meet you and hear your story, and I hope you'll come back and join us on another show in the future. Our guest today has been Chief Hugo Searle, the Chief of the Eagan Fire Department. Pleasure to have you here, and thank you and the men and women who protect us.
Thank you.
Right on the dot.